Okay, gotta have that coffee thing going. All right, let me make sure. Yes, I think we are live. Hello, everyone. This is Dwight Woods, Jeet Kune Rebel. Welcome to the Jeet Kune Dialogues, episode number 341. This is another edition of Ask Me Anything. As you're logging in, if you'd be kind enough to say where you're logging in from, hit the like button and feel free to continue doing so throughout the dialogue. If you're catch it, okay, so Scorch and Bucky are over on the YouTube, and like I said, there is something going on between Be Live and Facebook, and I don't know whether or not we are actually streaming to Facebook. So until and unless somebody shows up on Facebook and says, "Yep, you're streaming here," we might not be on Facebook at all, which will be kind of tough for some people. But then again, might not be, right? Actually, no, I think we're good on Facebook, to be honest with you. Uh, Anyhow, as they say, the show must go on. So let me just move some stuff around on my screen, and then we will get going. Okay, Scorch, check it again and see um, if you can. Check it again and see if we're live, because I think we are. But I don't know if people can pick it up and if they can comment or what have you. Anyhow, it'll be their loss. Right. Okay. So this is Ask Me Anything. And thank you very much to everybody. I mean, I think this is probably the first time that we've had the level of response in terms of sending in questions early versus waiting on the live stream before you send in your questions. So I'm gonna try to answer them in the order in which they came in, and see if we can get to all of them. All right. So the very first one I got. I mean, as soon as I announced the Ask Me Anything, Terry Valor, who is usually the first on here on Facebook. So since he hasn't shown up, that's why I'm thinking that something's wrong with the. Okay, so Mark says Facebook is not working on his end. Yeah. Oh well, we'll see. We'll see if Facebook can fix this. I don't have a whole lot of faith in the support people at Facebook. Not at all. Anyhow, so to get back to Terry Valor's question, Terry asked, why do you think there are different versions of the Junfan and JKD dummy sets, yet only one version of the Ungmoon form? Right. So I wasn't sure if Terry meant that there were different versions of both the Junfan sets and the JKD sets, or if he meant that there was something called the JKD set and there was something called the Junfan set. Right. Now, when I don't know for sure, I give you the best of my ability to research something, right? So I never learned the Junfan Gung Fu sets. I learned the Wing Chun wooden dummy long, long time ago. And the little bit that I know, what makes it the Junfan Gung Fu set is the opening. So instead of going from the on guard position and then going straight into the thing. Apparently, Bruce Lee would like throw the low side kick and then throw the finger jab, and then he would go into the form. And then when you finish that first set and you start the second set on the left side, he would do the same thing. So his opening was different from the normal traditional opening in the Wing Chun set. And apparently that is what is considered the Junfan set. The JKD set is a series of sequences that I have heard them described as they came from Bruce. And when I pressed for an explanation of what does they came from Bruce mean, it was explained it doesn't mean that Bruce Lee created them. It means that it's kind of a recollection of what Bruce Lee was observed to do on the wooden dummy. So, in other words, if Bruce Lee was freelancing on the wooden dummy, the way it should be in JKD, and then somebody had a recollection of, well, these were the things that he tended to do, then those things became, they were like collated or recorded or whatever in some form or fashion, and then those were passed on in a fixed form. So it went from Bruce Lee freelancing on the wooden dummy to a set called the Jeet Kune wooden dummy set, which I think now people learn by heart, and they might even have it in their curriculum, like to go from one belt or one level to the other. You have to know the JKD wooden dummy set, right? Now, um, in terms of why there's only one version of the Ung Moon form. Oh, so I should say, so my general answer, Terry, for why there's this and that and version one and version two or whatever is because it's all made up. That's why it's all made up. The Ung Moon form, again, there are people out there you can find who will tell you, oh no, this is something that Bruce Lee created. This is something that Bruce Lee practiced. Nah, nah. To the best of my knowledge, that ain't true. That na make it. Right. The Ung Moon form is something that Yuri Nakamura, bless his heart, made up. And it makes perfect sense because I remember I took I trained in Yuri Nakamura's. I never trained in his phase two or phase one class or whatever. I trained in his Shuto class a number of times, but I was there to observe how he taught the phase class, the JKD class, and it was very organized. Okay. And now that I think back on it, I mean, not now, but when I started thinking back on it, what they were doing in that class, probably to like start the class every time, was the Ung Moon form, which again is left side and right side, basic Wing Chun hand techniques, right? You know, so like you start with Buda on the right side, and then you go Buda on the left side, and then maybe you go Pak Sao here, and then you go Pak Sao here, and then maybe you go Bong Sao here, or whatever, right? That is another thing that I never learned. Okay, but it's a way to get people to practice the basic hands, I guess you could say, right, of Wing Chun or Junfan Gung Fu, put together into a set pattern. Well, I mean, I guess there's a pro to that, but then there's also a con to it as well. But yeah, Terry, that's why there's versions or whatever, because it was all made up, right? Then Jeff Campbell wanted to know, in the early Guru Dan seminar days, this one was funny. In the early Guru Dan seminar days, I've heard that they were FMA/Kali. However, the attendees knew that he trained with Lee and they pushed for the JKD stuff. Is this true? No, Jeff, that is not true. What kind of seminar setup is this where the attendees push for something? What's the scenario? Inasano starts teaching a seminar and he says, okay, get double stick, right? And the attendees go, there's like a mini revolt. And the attendees go, no, 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 no. Dan Inasano, you're Bruce Lee's boy. We want the JKD stuff. JKD. JKD, JKD, and so they push for that. No, that is not what happened, right? What that is, Jeff, is is I now I don't know where you heard that, right? But that is part of the whole Inasano legend, right? That oh man, how should I put this? Because there are aspects of that legend where what you described there, right? It's not that the attendees pushed for the JKD, it's that there were attendees who were disgruntled. There were attendees who were like, well, I thought this is Bruce Lee's boy. What is this stick thing? Right? Then you hit another outgrowth of that legend is that people go to a Ted Wong seminar. And when they come to the seminar, I guess it's their first Ted Wong seminar, they show up with double stick, right? And so now instead of holding those people who show up at a Ted Wong seminar with double stick, instead of holding them responsible for their own inane actions, no. You know what the Ted Wong people did? They blamed Dan and Asano, right? Dan and Asano confused those poor people and sent them to a Ted Wong seminar with double stick because Dan and Asano communicated to those people that a Jeet Kune seminar opens up with double stick. Sound plausible to you? No, not to me either. Right? So no, Jeff, it didn't happen that way. But I don't want to I want to underscore the what's the word? Not the deeper meaning, right? But the connection that there is to your question and to some of the Inasano detractor stuff that goes on out there. So no, it was not. Most of the people who brought Dan Inasano to their town for a seminar, a lot of them were like me. They were Inasano students, okay, and so um, when he came to Miami, I don't think there was a time. Okay, so for convenience, right? For convenience, I'm going to separate um, Jeet Kune, which means you do empty hands stuff, and Kali, which means you do weaponry stuff. For for sake of simplifying the discussion, and simplifying is not the correct word. It's actually dumbing down the discussion, right? So, for the sake of dumbing down the discussion, I'm going to separate JKD into a thing that is this, where you mimic Bruce Lee to the best of your ability. And then Kali is a thing where you use weapons, right? An Inasano seminar hosted by one of his students would feature instruction in both things. Why? Because that was how he made sure that his instructors were working on all the material. Then, depending on how long it is that you had been with him, then he could go. And this is the other thing. I know I'm not finishing each thought, right? This is the other thing. You could request what you wanted covered. And more often than not, he would honor that request. Sometimes he would just do whatever it is he wanted, right? But if you were smart, you you turned what you wanted into what he was doing. You see? So that you did get what you wanted and he was able to do what he wanted to do also. But if you were really a stickler and you were like, no, I need I need you to show this stuff because that's an area that I need that I'm a little bit deficient in, then he would oblige and he would cover that for sure. So this thing about um, people revolting and pushing for the JKD stuff. No, that is not true, Jeff. Jeff had a second question. Um, um, are wrestling, fencing, and boxing martial arts? For me, yes, but not in their but not in their sport form. The sport form of wrestling is not a martial art, right? So grappling methods are the, and it's not even that that it's not even, look, holding a guy down, right, in combat or for self-defense, that's grappling. Okay, restraining a guy in some shape or form. And I think that's what happened first, and then very very quickly it evolved into, because you know how men are, right? um, um, Contests of strength and what have you. So very very early on in humankind, I think that wrestling became a sport thing. Okay, so I think that wrestling is a sport that grew out of, let's call it the art, right? But I'm not saying that the second that one guy realized, if I apply pressure in the opposite direction to which a joint goes, I can control a guy or put him in pain or take him down to the ground or break something or wrench something. That was a combative method. So that could have been used for street defense, right? Even before there were streets. And I think that wrestling evolved out of that. Similarly, fencing is a sport that evolved out of what? Sword play. Evolved out of sword play as a combat method between gentlemen, right? And a self-defense thing. Same thing with boxing. Boxing is derived from the art of the fisticuff, right? Knocking a guy on his keister, okay, because he messed with you, got sportified. So they all did. So they're all martial art in origin, but the sport of boxing is the sport of boxing. The sport of fencing is the sport of fencing. And the sport of wrestling is the sport of wrestling. They have their origins in the combative arts or in the self-defense arts, but they're not, but they're sports. Okay. Um, Alex Hausman, Alex sent me a bunch of funny questions, right? Um, Excuse me. He wanted to know, the first thing he wanted to know is if I would cut my dreadlocks if I grew bold or bald enough. So that got me to wondering whether or not Alex thinks that under here, right, that I don't have hair, that like I'm bald or something. But no, I have gray hair until I get it colored, right? So I'm not bald, and it would not take boldness to cut dreadlocks. It would take a refuting of dreadlocks are not grown to be cut. Let me just put it that way. Okay, so no, Alex. But then his more serious question was, since we can't seem to stop fussing about Jeet Kune, should we just let it die? Well, no. If it's something that we fuss about, who's gonna one day just go, oh, all this fussing and fighting, I'm just gonna let Jeet Kune die? Not anybody who is seriously interested in it. I don't think that anybody who is interested in it would ever do that. But I think what we should all do is not fuss and fight, to paraphrase Bob Marley, right? Because what's the point of fussing and fighting over Bruce Lee and Jeet Kune? That doesn't make any sense. So if you believe what you believe, and what you believe is similar to what I believe, good. But then there are two other guys, and what they believe is different from what we believe. Okay, well, why do we have to fuss? I can just ask the guy, hey, so you think that what? And now, if he can explain it to me intelligently, and by intelligently, I mean by my standards, because I'm the one on the receiving end, then cool. Now, he might think he's being intelligent about it, but if I can't get a clear answer from him, okay, um, then here's what I do. Here's what I do. A guy says this and this and this and this, and I don't understand what he means. So I ask him a question, and then here's what he does. He throws my question back at me. Well, that's not clarification. Now, he started it. He made the statement. I asked for clarification of his statement, and he throws the question back at me as if to imply, well, you're too stupid to understand my brilliance. I don't play that game. You see, if you're going to make a statement, then you should be willing, if somebody challenges you, to be able to explain it. At least in my world, that's how it works, right? So no, I don't think that we should just let Jeet Kune die, and I'm pretty sure that Alex knew that that would be my answer. But then the second part of that question, connected to that first question, he says, referring to Bruce Lee, did he indeed leave us the responsibility to end it all? No, he did not. See, because that's presentism, right? And this is a very, very common thing. I see it all the time. Bucky and Nick and I had, and Bill, we had a discussion about it yesterday. And then Ronnie and I had a similar discussion about it today. Did Bruce Lee indeed leave us the responsibility to end it all? During Bruce Lee's lifetime, there was no fight between, again, I'm going to dumb it down and use terms that people use when they're trying to sow dissension. During Bruce Lee's lifetime, there was no contention between original Jeet Kune Do and Jeet Kune Do concepts. You understand? So there was no, Bruce Lee had no responsibility towards his eventual followers to be in a position to end it all. No, no, that doesn't, no. And then Alex wants to know if we could be mature enough to do so. Well, I don't know if it takes maturity to walk away from something that was life changing for you. I don't think that that's maturity. I think if you go, oh, you know what? I can't have, I'm done having these discussions about Jeet Kune Do or whatever. To me, that's a little bit of a cop out. It might even be it could be a little bit mental weakness, right? I'm not accusing anybody directly of that. For me, it would be, okay? It would be like me getting so frustrated that I can't make my points, right? Or me getting frustrated that nobody understands what I'm talking about. But see, that's not why I talk. I don't talk in order to gain friends and likes and followers and whatever. I'll ask people to follow my pages because I want to put something out there that I think is valuable, and that's what they do. If they think it's valuable, then they will like and follow. If they don't, then they don't. But I'm not trying to build an empire, right? Where the whole world thinks about Jeet Kune Do the way Dwight Woods, the Jeet Kune Do rebel, does. That ain't it. That ain't it. Now, that is it for some people, because there are people who go around telling, oh, Dwight did this and he got me kicked out of this and he got me bumped from this and he took down this video and he did this and whatever. But I'm getting all these likes and I'm getting all these whatever. Good for you. Good for you, right? I mean, get as much likes as you can, because when they bury you, okay, in before they bury you, in your eulogy, I guarantee you, the people who are closest to you, who are doing the eulogy, will talk about the amount of likes that you got on social media. Okay? And then they bury you and they erect the headstone. And instead of the headstone saying something like your inspiration continues to guide us to our personal liberation or something like that, it will say he got a ton of likes on Facebook and Instagram. Right? So yeah, okay. So then Alex wanted to know. He said this was cute. He says a friend of mine makes music. Would you like an opening jingle or song for the intro outro of your shows? And if so, what kind? Kung Fu or Caribbean? Right? Definitely Caribbean, Alex. Right when your friend gets to it. Okay. Then he wanted to know what was the story on the little Yoda. So that's back here over my left shoulder. Um, I have no idea. Somebody gave that to me along with the Green Hornet thing. I couldn't even tell you who it was that gave them to me. So there's no major story behind any of that. If you want to know the story behind the Bob Marley images and the Bruce Lee images, this is a cheap ripoff of old Joe Rogan when he had black and white photos of I think it was Elvis Presley and Elvis Presley and Rosa Parks and Jimi Hendrix, I think. This is back in his old warehouse studio in LA. So when I started, I this is the cheap version of that type of thing, right? Okay, all right. So let me go to the comments and see if there's anything there. Facebook not working. Facebook page is frozen for this program. Okay, right. Um, okay. Mark says there are different dummy sets, but one version of Ung Moon. Yes, yeah, that's what we were saying, right? Terry says no luck on Facebook. Okay, cool. All right. Yuri is a legend. He is. Okay. So Dell says in an old interview, Sifudan mentioned that Taki Kimura was his senior in Junfan Gung Fu. Do you know if Sifudan ever caught up to the same level of Junfan certification as Kimura? Um, well, you know, Dell, there is Greg Rhodes sent me a snapshot of it, and I think it's from a Bruce Lee article in shoot, I forget when, maybe 67 or so, right? And what it says something that I'll paraphrase it, right? I have three people who teach for me when I cannot be there. Taki Kimura and James Lee, trusted friends in Seattle and Oakland, respectively. Dan Inasano is another trusted friend who teaches as a hobby here in Los Angeles. Taki and James met me in the early stages of my development, and so they are more steeped in the gung fu aspects. Um, Whereas Dan met me in the midst of my evolution. So whenever I get together, and I'm messing up the quote, right? If I was a real Bruce Lee fan, I would know the quote exactly, right? But he says that when he gets together with Taki and James, he tries to get them to walk the pathless path. So the reason why I'm saying this is because for Inasano to catch up, right? Usually catching up means to catch up with somebody who is ahead of you. But in the grand scheme of the evolution of things, Jun Fan is actually in the back. If we look at the chronological history, right, of Jeet Kune, right, and Bruce Lee himself says it, Kimura and Lee met him in his early days, so they're more steeped in the Chinese way. Inasano met him in the midst of his evolution. So for Inasano would not be catching up to Kimura. Although, when it comes to the whole thing about third rank, like third rank being the first level of instructorship and what have you, I think that is because all three of them had achieved at a minimum that rank of third rank. So, but it's possible that Kimura had like a sixth rank in Junfan or seventh rank or something. I don't know, but no. So it was never a D. It was never a thing that Inosano had to catch up to Take Kimura in the Junfan, because like Richard Torres will back me up on this. Once Bruce Lee started referring to his art as Jeet Kune, then this whole thing about Junfan kind of, well, not disappeared. I mean, it was still there, but it wasn't emphasized anymore. So there wasn't really there wasn't a need for Inosano to catch up to Kimura. Okay. Um, Now, if by catch up you mean to learn what Kimura had learned, there are aspects of what they were. If you look at what, it in I think it's in Tommy Gong's book, right, or wherever you could find the um, the Seattle curriculum. If you look at the Seattle curriculum, then I have never seen anything in the Seattle curriculum that Inosano could not do, even though there were things that he was not doing and would not be doing. So remember that the Junfan, they have a different fighting position. Okay. In Junfan Gung Fu, the traditional or classical Junfan Gung Fu, their fighting position is different from the JKD fighting position. Okay. So could Inosano pull it off? Yes, he could pull it off. But there was no need for him to go backwards, right, and catch up to Kimura. I hope that makes sense. Right. Scorch wants to know how similar is Bukajalan Silat to Bukti Nagara Penjak Silat. So Bukajalan Silat is not a Silat style. Bukajalan Silat, right, is a train and approach. Bukajalan means open the way. So Cass has trained um, the so Bukti Nagara is, here's how we talked about it in the 80s. Um, Bukti Nagara, Tongkat, and Ratu Duri. Now it's either Ratu Duri or Ratu Adil. I don't remember, right? But it's one of the two Ratus. Those were referred to as carrier systems for Penjak Silat Sarat. So Cass, I don't know if Cass was trained in Bukti Nagara. I don't think he had to be, right? Um, and again, if I remember correctly, Inosano was put in charge of Bukti Nagara, that carrier system. Victor de Tours was put in charge, so to speak, of Tonkat, and then the Ratu Adil or Ratu Duri. I again, forgive me. Um, that was Maurice de Tours. Cass, as a student of Pendekar Paul de Tours, Cass trained in Sarat. Now, it's very possible that he trained in Bukti Nagara too, right? But this idea that Bukajalan Silat is a different Silat form, no, it's not. No, it's not. Dare I say, you know how Inosano did a thing called Mafalindo Silat, right? Which is not a new style of Silat. Mafalindo is just Inosano. I don't want anybody to tell me that I got to do it this way and I got to do this way or whatever. I'm going to see if because Inosano loves to put stuff together. You understand? Inosano likes to take. Well, I'll use Kali for this, right? Okay, I'll use no. Let me annoy Richard Torres, right? Inosano likes to enter with a kick from Savat, right? And then throw a lead punch, right, from JKD. And then trap from Wing Chun or JKD. And then go into an arm lock from Jiu Jitsu. Inosano loves to put stuff together, right? So he doesn't want anybody saying, well, when you do this style of silat, you have to stick to this style of silat or whatever. Now, he wants to take something from Mande Muda, right, and put it in with Bukta Nagara, right, or Tonkat or wherever. So what he says is, I'm going to do it this way, and I'm going to call it Mafalindo Silat, right? Because we got elements of Malaysian Bersilat in there. We got Filipino Kuntao Silat, and then we have Indonesian Penjak Silat. Okay? So I'm going to call my approach Mafalindo Silat. It's not a new style. It's not a new style. Bukajalan is not a new style. Bukajalan is the Cas Magna approach to the training, the teaching and the training and the practice of the art of Silat. What is contained in there is the systems in which he trained. So Cass trained with Paul de Tours, Steven Plink, Herman Suwanda, um, uh, Cass was in Holland with the Vries family. I think he trained also with Nick Mustafa. Um, that's as many as I can remember right now. So no, so it's not a different style of silat. It's a silat approach, right? So how similar to Bukajalan? No, that's not. I mean, how similar to Bukti Nagara? That's not it. That's not what it's about. All right. Um, okay. Terry said, "Sorry, I meant there are different versions of both the Junfan and the JKD sets." That I didn't know. So if you're telling me, Terry, that there's more than one version of what they call the Junfan sets, that I'm not aware of. As far as I knew, the Junfan set was just the Wing Chun, but with a different opening, right? And then the JKD sets, I don't know, maybe So let's see, if I remember correctly, when we learned the Wing Chun wooden dummy, it was broken into nine sets, I think, because it's 108, and if it's 12 motions in each set, right? It was broken into nine. I think. I could be wrong. I learned the wooden dummy. First time I learned wooden dummy was 1989, before you were born, Terry. Right? So maybe somebody switches them around, and so like how in Kali angle one is always the inward, right, with the right hand, but then after that every other angle could be different, but angle one is always that. So maybe somebody did that, I don't know. Set number one and set number two were kept the same, but then they started changing stuff around, could be. And then the same thing with the JKD sets, right? Whoever it is, for whatever reason, right? Changed it up to suit themselves. But the important thing, Terry, for me, the more important thing is, why are they being trained and memorized? Is it important? Is it important to memorize these things? Okay. Or is it important to do what Bruce Lee did and freelance on it? That's what everybody has to answer for themselves. Okay. If the memorization is the most important part, or if the development of a particular set of attributes, to paraphrase Paul Vunak, right? Why do we train on the dummy? Well, some people will tell you train on the dummy when you don't have a partner. And then training on the dummy is kind of resistance training. Okay. So that then when you bridge contact with a human, right, you cut through them like butter on a hot knife, because of the training on the wooden dummy. Now, everybody knows that Cas Magda is my favorite JKD senior. Okay. I highly recommend that you go out to his school. I think it's November or December every year that he has the JKD wooden dummy and Chisao seminar. I think you guys would go, oh, okay, I see what's going on here, right? Because there's no JKD set being taught, right? It's how to use the thing to improve your ability in sticky hands or close quarter combat type of stuff. And that's what's important. Okay. So, yeah, so there being different versions. Terry, put it in the comments after you hear this, and I'll scroll down and find it. How many versions do you know or have you heard about of each? How many versions of the Junfan wooden dummy set, and how many versions of the Jeet Kune wooden dummy sets are there? Okay. All right. Magazine says, I've heard of the sarong referred to as selendang. What do you call it? Sarong? Selendang is not something, I've never heard of that. All right. Um, Dell says, I believe that the birth of modern wrestling as we know it began when Emperor Nero outlawed gladiator games. Wrestling is the more human offshoot of Greek pancration. Well, so okay, could I don't know enough about wrestling or what have you. Um, Mark says it's not about likes, it's about living it. Nice one, right? So Dan stayed rank 3, Taki was rank 5, so Dan never reached his level. His level of what? Level of rank? Right? Um, Russell, I've been wondering where you are. I have not seen your name on Facebook in like forever, man. How are you? Right? Russell says, I think Sigun Taki was ranked 6. Destro says, no, he was 5. Okay, well, thanks. Right? Um, Magazine says, in the past, you said that you're not an expert in Silat, but you seem to be very book smart about Silat. I'm telling you what I'm an expert in, right? I'm an expert. Well, not am, was. I was an expert at Eastern Airlines computer system. Okay? That's what I was an expert at. That's about it. It's like the only thing. And I say that because I'm gonna humble brag a little bit here. But down in Barbados in about 1980, 81 or something, right? I created in the history of aviation in the island of Barbados, right? I created the first ever stored computer flight plan, self-taught, right? I mean, I had studied stuff, I came up to Miami to study the computer system and what have you, but then I sat down and created the first stored computer flight plan, right, in the history of aviation in Barbados. So I was an expert at that, right? That's what the only thing that I would ever claim expert level of. Um, what I am, magazine retriever, is a loudmouth with a pretty decent memory. You see? So that's how I can appear book smart about stuff. Because I have a fairly decent memory. Not quite eidetic, but fairly good. You see? So yeah, so no, I would not count myself as an expert in CLOT simply because I haven't put in the hours. I never did, for example. I never walked. How long is a football field? American football. 100 yards, right? Yes, 100 yards, I think, right? I never went to the football field at night and walked the lankas and did my jurus on the lankas the length of the football field repeatedly. I never did stuff like that. I didn't spend 3 months on juru number 1 before I was allowed to move on to juru 2 or whatever. right? People who have done stuff like that, they are experts. I never did stuff like that, right? I mean, right now, I'll admit to you, I learned the 8 jurus of Penjak Silat Bukti Nagara. I can't remember them. I can't even remember Juru 1. Now, I could mimic, I could look like Inasano asked me to do a Juru in Tulsa, Oklahoma last year. I made it up on the spot because I know different sequences, so I could create my own Juru. Oh, that's what I should do. I should create my own style of Sila. Right? Yeah. So I'm just book smart. That's all I am. Okay. So all right. I think that is it for what guys sent in. Right. So wait. There's a note from Russell. Usually busy around the broadcast time. Oh, okay. All right. Cool. No worries, Russell. Good to hear from you. Okay. Moving on. Um, So Cesar Polyakov sent this. Now, this was interesting. If Bruce Lee had lived after 1973, based on the books that we know he did read, despite the diversity of his interests, what would you recommend that Bruce Lee study, read, and inform himself to update the JKD to these times? Right now, English is not Cesar's first language, so right. I'm not sure if you really did mean what would I recommend to Bruce Lee, but since that's how he said it, I will take on the role to be a recommender of what books Bruce Lee should read to update himself. Right. So here's one: Enter the Kettlebell. He should read that. Okay, right? Um, Convict conditioning for calisthenic stuff, and then shoot, I usually have it. It's usually no, it's over there. Secrets of Advanced Bodybuilders. Right, so that is a series of books. So they have Secrets of Advanced Bodybuilders. Then I think they have Power Forearms. Then they have Maximum Calves, and maybe something else. So back in the '80s, there was an outfit out of Santa Monica called Health for Life, and their stuff in the '80s was kind of avant garde, right? And so that's something that I think Bruce Lee would have been interested in, right? I would recommend, because Bruce Lee looked into stuff like, because he had um, the beyond positive thinking, right, or the amazing power of positive thinking or whatever, right? I would recommend something like the psychology of achievement. Um, when it comes to business and marketing, I would recommend the entire Dan Kennedy No BS um, business and marketing series, right? And then, because I know that Bruce Lee had an interest in religion, right? Notice what I said. He had an interest in religion. I would recommend Neville Goddard's Awakened Imagination. Right now, I could have gone on and on and on and on, right? But Cesar had mentioned particular stuff, so that's why I came up with those 5 or 6 books or whatever, right? Okay, Jonathan Cooper asked, "How do you maintain a civil front talking to people who I will charitably refer to as useless shitebags who couldn't fight the tide in the bath?" Right? So the civil front is because my parents raised me well. You see? Now, behind the scenes, I'm a different character. But up front, I'll be civil. Okay? Right? Because that's what you do when you have even a little bit of class. Right? But Jonathan, as you know, because you and I have talked, right? They are useless. They really are useless. Okay? The people who get on social media, I mean, I think about it, man. Social media in some instances is one is a good thing that happened, but in more instances, I think, right, it is one of the worst things that happened to humanity. Okay, because now every jackass with an internet connection and a mobile phone thinks that everybody is interested in hearing what it is that he has to say, right? And some of them have like zero class. I mean, when you get to the F this and F that, right? And the cussing and what have you, on as you're on your phone or your computer or whatever on Facebook, you reveal yourself to have like, is it possible to have less than zero, right? You have less than zero class. And when you go running to other people, trying to bolster your own image, right? Because, oh, this person said this about me and this person this and this person, and you go run into somebody else, right? What to commiserate? Come on, come on, grow a pair. Okay, it's just Facebook. It's not that important unless you make your living on Facebook. If you make your living on Facebook, then you got to take it seriously. But I mean, yeah, if you make your living on Facebook, that's when you wake up. And even before you have your coffee, even before you say your prayers or meditate or whatever, you turn it on because that's your lifeline. But other than that, don't take it so seriously, right? So, Jonathan, it's for me, it's just fun. It's just fun. I've said this many times before. It is an exercise in clear thinking and clear speaking. That's what that's what it is for me, because um, yeah, it's an exercise in clear thinking and clear speaking, right? I'll weave that into something else, right? Okay, so where are we now? Okay, so Joe Jacobs wanted to know, what is your opinion on the daily decrease? Should we be striving to have the least amount of techniques and such? And if so, why do most JKD practitioners continue to learn more styles? All right, so there's a lot wrong with, and I say this affectionately, Joe, okay? There's a lot wrong with your question, right? I'm just teasing, right? Because Joe was teasing me earlier this week on Facebook, so I'm teasing him back. Um, I didn't have time to look it up, but I will when we're done. Okay. I will go to who wrote the Tao and see if I can find the source for the whole daily decrease thing. Okay. You know, like how they will tell you that with some politicians, you should take them seriously, but you shouldn't take them literally. I don't think when it comes to the daily decrease that you should take Bruce Lee literally, as in, well, I got 10 techniques. So if I'm true to the Bruce Lee philosophy, every day I should cut down one of those techniques. So on day 10, you'll have one technique. Now, that one technique better be able to handle every situation that you could ever come across. That's why you don't take it literally. It is an idea. The idea, it's just like on Wednesday when I said that Bruce Lee's fight was not against classical or traditional karate. Bruce Lee's fight was against mental slavery. So the daily decrease is an idea that you don't keep. It's similar to what he said about the sculptor. The sculptor doesn't keep adding clay. What the sculptor does is he starts with a, 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 a an amount of clay, and then he chisels away at it. And then there's the whole image of the imagery of, him revealing what was hidden inside that huge lump of clay by the way he chiseled and designed it and whatever, right? But he had to start with a lot in order to chisel it down and reveal the true beauty or what have you. So that's imagery that Bruce Lee is building for us, right? That you should, because the other part of that is to hack away at the unessentials, right? So that means that whatever it is that you're doing, whatever it is that you get interested in, you got to seriously analyze it. You got to go within and look at it and see, okay, is there anything? I'll put it to you this way, right? Okay. Simultaneous parry and hit is more efficient than block and hit. But it's hard for a beginner to get to simultaneous parry and hit day one. It's easier for the beginner to understand block one, hit two. It's easier for the beginner to get 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1. And then both hands go out at the same time. When the beginner gets to that point of being able to go simultaneously rather than stop and then hit, right? Which is not the same thing as stop hit, okay? That's decrease. You see? But it is also increase because now he has added to the store of his knowledge and ability. But his functionality is now decreased because he can actually, his functionality is decreased, but it's also improved. You see? So you see how tricky this is? And that's the thing about the language. If you take it literally, then by day 10, you'll have one technique. And that obviously cannot be the message behind Bruce Lee's talking about the daily decrease. No, it is a mentality. You know, it's like how stories in the Bible, okay, you can think about them on different levels. You could just read it as a storybook and then, oh, this is a cute story between Cain and Abel, right? Or it's like Cass said this at Sealot Camp the other week. He goes, it's like reading Don Quixote when you're 16 versus reading it when you're 65. You see? I was watching, what was I watching? I was watching Hannah, that movie. I was rewatching Hannah. And then there's a little scene where she's reading the Grimm fairy tales. Okay. So, and then it's like, again, the Bible and parables and whatever. When we were kids growing up in Barbados, let me see if I can remember it. A parable is a earthly story with a heavenly meaning. I think that was the lyric in the song, right? So it's like, what's your level of understanding when you read something that Bruce Lee said? Oh, and by the way, there's this thing out there. It's very popular. It's Bruce Lee once said, don't buy your children all the stuff and whatever. Instead, teach them something and something. Okay. That is not a Bruce Lee quote. It is very popular, right? Because if you put a nice sounding quote about raising children and you put a picture of Bruce Lee and Brandon Lee, right? Well, Bruce Lee is 50 years gone and still incredibly popular. So, of course, the majority of people will not question the authenticity. Look, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to find a quote from somewhere and I'm going to put it up with a picture of Bruce Lee and see how popular it becomes, right? And it ain't his at all. So that's what happened, right? And I'm bringing that up because it's an example of how people refuse to think, refuse to question. There's a famous picture of Bruce Lee and Jesse Glover that is not, right? Because at some point, some idiot on the internet saw a picture of Bruce Lee with a black guy and knew that Bruce Lee had a student, Jesse Glover, who was a black guy. So they go, oh, this is a picture of Bruce and Jesse Glover. And that one is well known also. Even Beardy puts it in his videos. That's an example of how some people, they're not smart enough to think. Not even to think for themselves, to just think, period. Okay? So you put that up. So I go, no, don't do that. Instead, do a little bit of research and see if you can find out, right? If Bruce Lee really did write anything about raising children. Now, if you do that, here, so whenever there's a quote that I can't verify, get that I don't know by heart, that I can't verify, there are um, there are two of John Little's books that I run to immediately: Striking Thoughts, and The Warrior Within. I think it's those two, right? So I knew that the thing about children, raising children, was in Striking Thoughts because I've read that book. But what I knew but forgot to mention is that, like the Tao, what Bruce Lee wrote, what was compiled into Striking Thoughts, are not original Bruce Lee stuff. It's again examples of Bruce Lee copying from another source for himself. And then Little had access to Bruce Lee's notes, so he put it he put it into a book, right? So it's not like Bruce Lee's original thoughts on raising children. Okay, so anyhow, why am I telling you this? Yes, because you got to think. So if Bruce Lee says it's about the daily decrease, you got to think, what does that mean? It cannot mean that by day 10 you have one technique. It cannot mean that. Okay, it is a shedding. Let me get esoteric here. It's a shedding of inhibitions. It's a shedding of fears. It's a shedding of behaviors